This is the roadmap to success. You know, I worked with so many dogs, and this is quite an interesting crew that we have here. So we have Wesley, Frankie, Rocky, Trixie, and Fleabelle. Fleabelle. Who just was very flea infested when they got her, and so that's kind of where the name came from. All right, so basically, overall, when you have multiple dogs that live together, this is the roadmap to success. When you have multiple dogs that live together, rules and structure become more important than they are in other situations. And these dogs really only had a couple of minor rules, and some of them were inconsistently enforced. So I like the guardians to enforce the rules of no furniture, not being within 7 feet of anybody who's eating, including the other dogs, having to sit before I'm going to pet them, so we're going to start petting them with a purpose. We want to add as much structure as we can. So if the dog jumps up on me or scratches at me, I pet it, I'm telling the dog, yes, you're the boss of me, because when you tell me what to do, I act. So next time the dog scratches, instead of petting it when he wants, give him a counter order, or her. And as soon as they sit, pet them and sit under pet them under their chin and say sit. If they're already sitting and you just want to pet them yourself, tell them to lay down or come and sit over here, and then I'll pet you. They just have to pay for their attention, and they do that through obedience. Now, if we get to the point where I just want to pet, after we will get to the point where the dog's like, I want attention, I'm going to go sit in front of the humans to prepay for it. And we want to acknowledge that as much as we possibly can, because the more we do that, the more they're inclined to do that. We're rewarding desired actions and behaviors. The more we do that, the more dogs will engage in those. The more we pet them when they jump up on us, the more they'll continue to do those things that we don't want. I want the guardians to also use passive training. So every time one of the dogs comes and sits down next to you, pet it and say the word sit. Not good sit, not good dog, just sit. Every time it comes to you, pet it and say come. Every time it lays down, pet it and say down. If it goes in the kennel on its own, we pet it and say kennel. Or just say the word kennel if it just happens to go in there on its own. I'd also like the guardians to use the escalating consequences to disagree. First one is we hiss, 1 hiss per incident. And I match the intensity of my hiss with whatever the dog is doing at the time. I have a level 1 hiss, like a tss. I have a level 10 hiss, which is more like a tss. So you want to match the intensity of your dog. Remember, you hiss before they do the wrong thing. My hiss is translated, don't even think about doing that. So hiss before. If there's a boundary in place, I hiss when they're about a foot away. The second consequence is to stand up abruptly. To a dog, standing up is your I'm in business position. Remember, your authority goes whatever direction your hips are pointed at. So imagine you have a flashlight where your belly button is, and that's pointing where your authority goes. So when you stand up, the dog will take a step back, pivot your hips, and follow the dog until it's stationary, then stop. As soon as it's stationary, take a right foot back and stop. And then you can go about your business. Third consequence is to march directly at the dog until it turns sideways. March at it with intent. Now we have a little dog that's kind of got some health issues. That's a dog that we wouldn't do this for. But the other dogs, we're going to march directly towards them, like I showed in a couple of the videos, like right here, about claiming the area around the space to make sure that there's no dog fights between the dog in and out of the kennel. And then the fourth consequence I have is I do a leash timeout. I put the dog on a leash, and I step on the leash until the dog sits. When it sits, I slide my foot that's on the leash towards the dog to take the tension off the leash. When it lays down on its own, I don't tell it to sit or lie down and wait for it to do it on its own. When it lays down, it's calm, then I take my foot off the leash. Now at that point, the dog's on the leash. It's going to drag the leash as it runs around. That's okay as long as it's supervised. It's dangerous unsupervised, so if you can't watch your dog, take the leash off. For the third consequence, when we march at the dog, we're going to march at the dog with intent until that dog turns to the side. Then we go to the second consequence. I can't remember if I went over that or not. Now, the guardians here are remodeling their house, and so there's a lot of stuff piled in the living room right now because they're reworking other rooms in the house. For dogs, more confined space can create more tension and anxiety, and we already have a lot of anxiety with these group of dogs to begin with. So I'd really recommend that the guardians remove as much clutter from the main room as possible, so there's more open space. It's better feng shui. It'll be more helpful for the dogs. In one of the videos, we went through a counter conditioning exercise, and that's something we'd like to have the guardians doing with the dog at least once a day with the beagle and the pit. And so we're going to, again, have the beagle as far away as possible. We're going to bring it down. I'm going to go through it because it's in the video above this. But that's something that needs to happen at least once a day, every day. I'd also like to see the beagle and the pit walked together. At first, we're going to have a good amount of distance. Just make sure neither dog or person is in front of the other dog and person, because whoever's in front is in charge. I'd like the guardians to get in the habit of not walking around the dogs rather than walking through them, to help the dogs understand that I'm in the follower position. My job is to defer to the humans instead of having the humans walk around me, which makes me think that I have more authority than I actually do. We're going to provide structure when we're letting the dogs out of the kennel. So when we go to this, and you can go to doggoneproblems.com, click the dog training tips tab, and then there's a search box on the right. You can type in kennel training. I have a bunch of videos where I explain how to do this. Basically, I open the door and I step in front of the door and I block the exit. And I move away from the kennel in a very measured way, only allowing the dog out when it's completely calm. And we should also practice leashing up any of the dogs that get excited for a walk multiple times a day. Now, when we do the leash training, basically what we do is we get up and we walk to where the leash is. If the dog walks in, anytime the dog walks in front of us, we turn around and go sit down. Don't say no, just stop what you're doing. When you get to the point where you can walk all the way to where the leash is with the dog staying behind you, the next step is reaching for it. A lot of times just the reach will get the dog jumping up and bouncing around excited. Excited is not happy when it comes to dogs. They can be the same, but usually they're just excited. It's an unbalanced state. So the first step is I just reach for it. When I get to the point where I can reach for it, the dog stays calm, then I pick it up. As soon as the dog bounces, I put it back and I go sit down and I repeat the whole process again. This will take a lot of repetition at first, but eventually, if the dog understands as soon as I walk in front or as soon as I get excited, the process stops, the dog will start staying behind you, which is more of the follower position, and will stay calm throughout the leashing process. The energy your dog has inside the house when you leash it up is the energy it's going to carry with them on the walk. Now, one of the guardians here already discovered if we have a high energy dog, taking them outside playing fetch or letting them run around freely and then going for a walk a little bit later on is a great way to deplete some energy, and we want to continue to do that. For the fetch, anytime one of the dogs being rambunctious, if it fetches, taking it outside to do a little fetching is a great thing to do as well. But make sure that we get to the point where we can actually, and the little addendum that I have to the leashing exercise, once I get to the point where I can pick it up and the dog stays calm, then I walk away, reset the exercise, and then I walk to where the leash is. I tell the dog to sit before I reach for it. Once the dog sits, then I reach. If it gets up, I put it back. We want the dog to remain seated throughout the whole process. This way the dog understands the only way that I'm going to go forward is I stay nice and calm. Let's see. I'd like the guardians, I talked about passive training. We'd like the guardians to start feeding the dogs in the morning instead of in the evening. Right now they're only being fed once a day, and I think that might be a contributing factor because the dogs are probably have grumbly stomachs all day long. So I'd like to feed them in the morning. Now, for the dogs, I would make sure they're all 7 feet apart and make sure the human eats something first, and then give the dog permission to eat. Now, one of our dogs who's asleep right over here likes to take some food and walk away and put it down. And the guardian doesn't like that. She'd like to stop that. So what we would do for that is basically just, as soon as the dog walks away, we pick up that bowl, dump the food out of it, back in the bag, put the empty bowl back down. The dog can come and lick the bowl, but as soon as you walk away from the bowl, the food disappears. That's closer to what will happen in the wild if they, kill a rabbit or something he's eating and he goes over to take a pee, comes back, the other dog's going to eat his portion. So we're just going to kind of mimic that same thing. Let's see, what else do we want to go over? I'm trying to think, what am I leaving? Oh, the focus exercise. For the focus exercise, make sure that's 1 second, 1 second for the first couple movements. And if one of the guards is kind of going like this right to the dog's mouth. Remember, we have again, you can search for this on doggoneproblems.com, focus exercise. But I'm going to start out with my shoulders, my knees shoulder width apart, dog sitting right in front. And as soon as the dog looks up at me, I go raise the treat halfway between my face and the dog's face. Then I travel in a straight line towards the dog's face. And what I'm trying to do is keep the dog looking at me in the face. Doesn't have to be looking me in the eyes, just anywhere in the face. And then every time I pop the treat in the dog's mouth, I'm going to say the word focus. At first, we're going to do 1 second, 1 second, for about 10 or 12 treats. I'd like the guardians to be doing this with each dog once a day. Now, after we've done this a while, then we can go, maybe the second or third day, then we go 1 second, 2 seconds on the second movement. And eventually, and then we're going to go at the dog's pace. The dogs will be at different paces, that's fine. Eventually, when we get to the point where like 20 seconds for that second movement. That way the dog has to maintain focus, and this is a great way to redirect our dog's attention. When they're focused on something else, we say focus, and it's kind of like squirrel, and if you've seen that movie. Okay, I'm sure there's probably some other things that we went over that I forgot to include in the video, but the guardians here can always call me, as all my clients can, and I'm always available to my clients after the session. Remember, everything that you do trains your dog, only sometimes you mean it.